What's up, Wizards Dev and the chicken just off to my left over here. We're from Mtg. We like it on Magic, and today we got day 2 of Brothers War spoilers. Now, we didn't see as many cards from the main set today as we did yesterday, but I think that in contrast with yesterday, just about every single thing that we saw today is at least interesting to talk about in Standard. So there's a lot of cards I think might have some potential, so let's go ahead and get to it. I guess the good thing about a day like today, but the good thing about a day like today is that I don't have to start with like crappy cards and work my way up or anything. I just jump right in with like solid playables, like these couple of reprints that we saw today, both of which are probably going to end up being some of the most played cards that we saw, like all day. Like Monastery Swiftspear, which is back, and I missed her so much. It's been like 6 years. I was going to say it hasn't been that long, but time flies. It's actually been quite a while since this card was in Standard. But last time MS was in Standard, it painted the whole format red. Puns. This is just a ridiculous one drop. In case you've never been like privy to the existence of this card, it's up there in the best red 1-drops of all time. I mean, Ragavan exists, but this is probably still in the top 3 or 5 red 1-drops to ever exist, and now it's in Standard again, which I'm a little excited and a little nervous about. Like in mono red, which I guess we'll start with. You're playing Bloodthirsty Adversary a lot of the time in the 2-drop slot, which ensures that you play some number of cards that can, trigger this thing's prowess. So, just like the old days, you play your 1-mana burn spell, 1 mana 2 damage, shock effect, you play with fire in this case, and get in for, a total of 4 damage. So remember, you only paid 1 mana. You got going on turn 1 with the Monastery Swiftspear. So if you can just Lightning Strike on turn 2, then suddenly you're actually dealing a lot of damage, right? But again, with Adversary in the format, I imagine you're going to be triggering prowess with relatively few instant sorceries. A lot more than you might think in your mono red deck, but that's not really the deck that I'm worried about. Mono red got another piece today that's more worrisome than that. We'll bring up Ragavan again for that one, actually. But honestly, what I'm more worried about Swiftspear in is the blue-red decks that already have access to Delver, They have Hot Boy Jin, too, as well, and a couple of other important creatures you might want in that deck. But I expect that this replaces things like Electrostatic Infantry, maybe, perhaps. I don't know. It's going to replace an existing creature in the blue-red aggro deck and just make that deck very strong. You got Delver in this to get on board on turn 1. You untap with all of your tricks available to you on turn 2. Your opponent probably hasn't killed your guy unless they have cut down or something. But still, if this deck gets to go first, 9 times out of 10, it's going to be a real problem if it gets either of its 1-drops down. So blue-red was already kind of a force in the format. Not necessarily on the tournament scene, but like if you play Arena, you've seen the blue-red deck like a lot. So, I imagine this makes the deck even better and maybe even a contender because Monastery Swiftspear is a ridiculous Magic card. Oh, we also got Blast Zone back today, man. Blast Zone, of all things. Cool to see this, and it makes perfect sense thematically, I guess, flavorfully for the set. And it also is going to work really well with a couple of things that are already in Standard. Jund Windgrace probably wants this card. You bring a Blast Zone back from your yard. You can just pitch it in the early game. You don't have to use it. Just pitch it in the early game or something. Some other effect. Maybe you mill it with a Teachings of the Kieran or something. And then you can just have old buddy boy, old Will Soul of Windgrace, bring it back for you. You can blow every small thing up from there and just win with your Windgrace or something. So, seems hot. Same thing with Slogurk, by the way. Slogurk seems like an interesting card with this. We're sort of seeing a lands deck, take shape. I don't know if it's really going to take form yet, but we're seeing some cards for it, and we already had some cards for it. We just got Titania and all of the cards that go with her to fuse her together and stuff. So that kind of has a signpost towards a lands deck, and this, again, just another thing that you probably want in a deck like that. So I'm kind of excited. Hi. Yes, I've changed shirts. That's because I forgot to do this card the first time, and I'm actually coming back to do this card now. So let's look at In the Trenches. Real quick, this is 3 mana, 1 and 2 white for an enchantment. Creatures you control get +1/+1. You can also pay 5 and a white and exile target non-land permanent you don't control until In the Trenches leaves the battlefield. You can only do this as a sorcery, and you can only do it once. So it's just a strictly better Glorious Anthem with like a Banishing Light attached to it for double the cost. So one of those, being able to anthem all your guys, and then still later in the game, this has an effect. This can take something off the board, and that allows you to attack more easily, or just, you get to play an anthem and a removal spell in the same card. It seems really, really good, but, I've said this already on Twitter, but I think that we might be at the point where a 3-mana Anthem effect as an enchantment that basically doesn't do much besides like boost your 1 and 2 drops the turn it comes into play might not be good enough for Standard, but I think that might be why they put the removal ability on it, is to make it good enough for Standard. So we'll see. You know, Banalish Marshal was a great card. It was. Even though it could die to like a lightning strike or something, and it could do that in this format too. Banalish Marshal was an Anthem effect that could attack, so it didn't feel like doing nothing on turn 3, right? You advance your board state by playing a creature that can attack and defend, and, you know, invalidate your opponent's 2 power creatures over there. So, you know, this is a little different. If you're on the draw and you're forced to play this on turn 3 and your opponent's been playing creatures all game and breathing down your neck, I'm not sure that this is really what you need to be doing on turn 3 in a lot of those game states. So I'm actually not convinced. And this is coming from a dude who kind of loves Glorious Anthem. It's in my cube. Like I really like me a Glorious Anthem, especially in Limited, but in Standard, I'm not sure, you know. I've seen this compared to Wedding Announcement, and Wedding Announcement is probably the better card. All things considered. You know, it's a 3-mana Anthem effect that actually gives you board presence in the form of a creature, or maybe a card. That's not board presence, but usually it gives you a creature the turn it comes into play, and then another one, and then maybe another one or a card, and then it gives you the Anthem. It's so much more for 3 mana than a card like this. Although, again, if you do happen to make it to 6 mana in your aggro deck, which you probably don't want, but if you do, it's a nice little panic button. Get that huge thing off the table. Now I can swing more easily. So I think the card is going to at least see attempts at play, and it might be decent in tokens decks and stuff like that. But I could be wrong there too. I mean, the tokens decks really have a lot of 3-drops that they want to play, and a lot of them are probably better than this in a lot of cases. So there was a time where I would have freaked out about Strictly Better Glorious Anthem, and it probably wasn't even that long ago, but now I think maybe, am I just getting jaded? Am I just, or is this just realism? It's hard to tell sometimes, but I'm just not sure that we're at the point right now where a 3-mana Anthem effect that doesn't really create board presence the turn it comes down is going to be good enough on the draw for aggro decks to like really consider. I think it's actively hurt you on the draw in some cases. But again, I know it's going to sound really weird to a lot of Magic players. Like, dude, this speeds up your aggro deck so much. Not as much as you think. Not as much as you think. Not for 3 mana. So, you know, we'll have to wait and see about this one. It's the one that I'm like most willing to be wrong about. The one that I'm like hoping that I'm wrong about the most. But I'm still not sure. Hopefully it's just cynicism. Hopefully I am just jaded. But I look at a card like this with a more critical eye than I ever have before, and there's a reason for that. And before we get to my favorite card of the day, which I'm nonetheless conflicted about, we'll get to it. It's not because I don't think it's playable, it's for reasons. But anyway, we're going to talk about the commands next. Now, as I record this, we still haven't gotten the green command. We only had 3 commands for a while, and then like an hour later, we got the blue one. So we might get the green one tonight, but I want to go through these first because I think the last card I want to talk about is just like more important. And kind of, I'm more hype about it, but the commands do look solid to me. So let's start off here with the black command. This is Gix's command. This is 5 mana for a sorcery. So do keep that in mind when you evaluate it. But you choose 2 of these things. Put 2 +1/+1 counters on up to 1 creature. It gains lifelink until end of turn. Or destroy each creature with power 2 or less. Return up to 2 creature cards from your graveyard to your hand. Or each opponent sacrifices a creature with the highest power among creatures they control. Now, I asked Twitter before I came on, this is before we had the blue one, but I asked Twitter before we came on, which one is your favorite of the 3 that we had seen so far? And the comments are honestly like kind of split between this card being the best one and this card being the worst one, which was really interesting to me because I kind of see it the same way. I could see both sides of the issue, but ultimately evaluating this card, I'm not sure that it ends up seeing much standard play, at least not right now with what we know that we have. This does look like a really good card for like value-based black decks, whether it's mono black or like a Golgari deck or, you know, something else that wants to play like a mid-range, grindy kind of value thing. This looks pretty decent, you know, blow all the tokens up for the most part. And while also being able to blow up your opponent's biggest creature along with their smallest creatures. So that seems like it might be kind of decent on some boards. Kill your biggest guy and bring back 2 of my dudes. It seems like a great value play too. It's like 3 for 1 kind of, so. Not too shabby on some modes and in a lot of board states, which is the case with some of these, pretty much every command ever printed. On a lot of board states, you can find a use for 2 of these modes, right? But the problem I have is that it is 5 mana, which is a lot just by itself, but also we have Invoke Despair in Standard, which I think is the better card. We also have Cruelty of Gix for what that is worth, and I think that might be the better Gix card, especially with this being sorcery speed. If it was instant speed, I think we might be talking, but at sorcery speed, I'm just not too sure about it. Kill your biggest guy, and then like +1/+1 counters and lifelink on a dude swinging, like maybe that's a decent mode. Like, it's not too hard to think of game states wherein 2 of these modes are a blowout, right? But again, you just can't play all the 5-drops, But I say that. But last season's mono black deck with Blood on the Snow, that deck played like Invoke Despair and Loth and like other 5-drops. Am I mistaken? I feel like I'm purposefully repressing the memory of that deck. I feel like sometimes it played Junji, right? But not all the time. But still, that deck played a ton of 5-drops. And so I might just be underestimating the amount of 5-drops a black deck can play. It might be way more than I think. But at the same time, I'm not sure this is great. I can't say that it's situational, but at the same time, it's definitely vying for its spot in your deck and contending with some pretty heavy hitters. So at the end of the day, I'm not sure that this card is bad, per se, but I think that in some ways you could make an argument it's the least likely to see Standard play right now, considering what we have in the 5-drop slot. The red one's next. This is X and a red for a sorcery with choose 2. First mode, choose target player. They may discard up to X cards, and then they draw a card for each card discarded this way. Second mode, this spell deals X damage to target creature. Third mode, this spell deals X damage to target planeswalker. And fourth mode, target creature gets +X/+0 and gains haste until end of turn. I can't help but like this. I saw a couple of people on that same Twitter post saying, like, this one just is butt ugly. This is not a very good-looking Magic card to some people, but I'm not convinced this one sees all the play in the world either. But I do think that this one is interesting, right? It's modal. Somebody else on Twitter said that it feels more modal than the other ones because it has an X cost. And I agree. I think it's a good take, This one feels like it has the most flexibility a command could ever have. But are the modes really good, The wheel mode will, I'm sure, be pointed at yourself a lot of the time. Although, if you know your opponent has a ridiculous card in their hand, you can just force them to discard it. They're drawing other stuff, but you can make sure they don't have that thing. So that's kind of cool. But I imagine you're going to wheel yourself a lot of the time, which is weird. Some of the time, because, if you cast this for X equals 5, 6 mana, how many cards do you actually have in your hand when you have 6 mana available? Probably not so many. So how many times are you really choosing the first mode? But the other modes are the ones that are good, right? I imagine if you roast a creature and a planeswalker at the same time, which is super likely to be able to happen, the card's good, And when you hit that Wandering Emperor, that's on like 2 loyalty as well as like a 2/2 that it created. It only took you 1 card, right? I mean, it only took them 1 card too, but at least you're not getting bodied on the value. 1 card, 1 card. It's totally fine. Or maybe you kill like a Liliana and a Graveyard Trespasser. You have to discard a card, but you know what I'm saying. Anytime you're able to bust a creature and a planeswalker with this, I think you feel pretty good about yourself, and it shouldn't cost too much mana to do that some of the time. Other times it will, but maybe it's late in the game, you have the mana. That's what I'm saying, is that the card feels like you can kind of play it on turn 3, but you can also play it on turn 8, and it's like pretty good then, What is, again, the fourth mode? Just making sure. Yeah, it's a Howl from Beyond that gives the creature haste. This could also be kind of decent. Again, like, blow up your dude, just roast that guy over there and then get in with, like, a huge boy. That seems fine. And, like, maybe it didn't even cost your mana to play the creature. Maybe it's a token you made with a planeswalker. I don't know. I'm thinking out loud here. But still, I imagine that if you do have extra mana left over, you just give, like, the dude you played this turn +2/+0 in haste, shock that guy and get it off the board, get in. Like, these are decent modes, but is it worth the slot? Opportunity cost is the bane of deck builders everywhere. And I don't know that this is worth the cost to put in some decks. But, I imagine there's going to be the odd, like, I don't know, Mardu mid-range deck, kind of control-y deck that might actually be able to leverage this pretty well. But in Mardu, you probably have better removal cards. I don't know if that was the best, but still. There might be mid-range or control decks, a Jeskai deck even, that might want access to something along these lines. So I wouldn't be surprised to see this as like a 1 or 2 up in a deck here and there somewhere along the line. Now, we got the black, red, and white ones in a batch all together earlier. It took us a second to get the blue one, like I said, but I think I'm still going to read the blue one next. Because of all the ones we've seen so far, I think I might like the white one the most, but the blue one is Urza's Command. You might expect that to be fairly powerful, so let's read it. 4 mana, 2 and 2 blue for an instant. That's different right there. Choose 2. Mode 1. Creatures you don't control get -2, -0 till end of turn. Mode 2. Create a tapped Power Stone token. Mode 3. Create a tapped 0/0 colorless construct artifact creature token with this creature gets +1/+1 for each artifact you control. We call those constructs. And on Mode 4, you scry 1 and then draw a card. So I'm pretty sure just make a dude scry 1 draw is like probably good at instant speed. If this was sorcery speed, I think it would not be great, but the fact that this is instant, I think really picks it up, and it might be objectively the best command that we've seen so far. But again, I just like the white one more. It costs less, it does stuff. I don't know. I want to talk about it more. The blue one, though, does seem aggravating. 4 mana is a lot. Just throw that out there. 4 mana is a lot, but even if all you do is like make dude, your guys do less damage to me this turn, so I get to the 5 mana sweeper or whatever. I think that might be kind of good enough. You probably wouldn't make a dude in that case, but still, make Power Stone token in case I don't draw a land. That's what it is in control decks. Your guys get -2 mana, so make Power Stone in case I don't draw the land. 5 mana sweeper, maybe. But there's all kinds of other stuff this thing does. If you are playing artifacts, and suddenly you can make a relatively big guy off of this spell. I imagine in like commander decks that play a ton of artifacts, this is probably going to be dangerous. But in standard, in those decks that play a ton of artifacts, I'm not sure this costs too much, right? At the same time. So there is that. Do you really, in your standard aggro artifacts deck that plays a bunch of 1 and 2 mana artifacts, is this really worth the slot? Maybe. I don't know. But still, in control-y decks, does it do enough? Because note that the only way it actually affects the board state is creating tokens, right? It creates Power Stone token, which doesn't really feel like you're affecting the board state much. And it creates a 0/0, really a 1/1 construct. But of course it can make a 2/2 if you make a tapped Power Stone token and a construct. But again, you got a Celestis in play, maybe it makes a 3/3 in that case. Like I could see cooking up like a decent flash creature with this. I could, but I'm still not convinced that this is worth slots in a lot of control decks right now. What control really needs, I think, is ways of dealing with like multiple permanents on the battlefield at the same time, because so many things give so much value in standard right now, whether it's Fable or Wandering Emperor or whatever. A lot of the cards that people are playing at the highest level create tons of value in one package, and it's really hard for traditional control decks to deal with that. And does this help them do that in any way? I'm not too sure. And for 4 mana, a card that draws cards, you'd rather play this or Memory Deluge, So I'm not super convinced, but this is one of those that might surprise me, and I'll readily admit that. I could very well be like kind of wrong about this one, but it looks like they made the modes kind of not super great in strictly competitive environments. But again, this one could totally surprise me. Turns where EOT make a 3/3 or 2/2 even construct, and also scry 1 and draw. Like that could be backbreaking in certain game states. So I could be wrong about this one, and it's more impressive than I think, especially at instant speed. So I know I'm hedging some bets here, but it doesn't look super impressive. But again, I can picture a few game states that are relatively common where this card could be kind of pretty good. But up next, we got Kayla's Command here. This is 3 mana, 1 and 2 white for a sorcery. Choose 2 of these. Mode 1, create a 2/2 colorless construct artifact creature token. Mode 2, put a +1/+1 counter on a creature you control. It gains double strike until end of turn. On Mode 3, search your library for a basic plains, put it in your hand, shuffle. On Mode 4, you gain 2 life and you scry 2. I actually think this is pretty decent. Again, just like all the other commands, I've said this so far. Sound like a broken record, but I mean it. Is it worth a slot in the decks you want to play it in? I like that in aggro, it doesn't really do like a History of Benalia impression like I want it to, but it can put a +1/+1 counter on your 2-drop, get to swing in with double strike, and also make a creature to block with, or just develop your board state more while also making your 2-drop like ridiculous for a turn. And it gets to keep the +1/+1 counter, right? So, that's not bad either. You go like Guardian of New Benalia on 2, this on 3, and your Guardian can swing for 6 that turn, and now it's a 3/3, so it's just kind of hard to deal with. It's just, I think, that this card, just based on those 2 modes alone, could be pretty decent, but the other 2 modes look more like they're for like control or mid-range decks, right? Scry 2, gain 2 is not the best. It looks like the weakest mode, right? But if you happen to have, say, a Planeswalker out, like, say, the new Teferi or something that draws cards, this doesn't seem terrible in some ways at sorcery speed because, 3 mana, make a dude to protect your... Let's say you have 5. You play Teferi, right? So 3 mana, make a dude to protect your Teferi, draw a card after you scry 2 and then gain 2, right? Scry a couple, and then draw the card with Teferi after the scry. Teferi gets a loyalty. You have a guy to protect your Teferi now. You're up 2 life in your control deck. That's at least something, right? So I could see this being played in some decks, or maybe, third turn. Third turn, you make a 2/2 to block with, and also you go get the planes to make sure you can cast Depopulate or something next turn. There's just, again, a lot of game states, especially on turn 3, where I could see this being pretty decent. We see these kind of hybrid control aggro decks, which is a weird thing to say. And I'm not talking about like blue-red tempo. I'm talking about like Esper, which, by the way, at Worlds recently, which was a standard event, it was like a couple of days ago as I say this, Esper was like 69% of the format, which was not nice, despite what you might think. Esper really took over the format, apparently, in competitive Magic after Meathook exited. So, and Esper is kind of a hybrid control, plays a lot of removal, plays a couple of main deck counterspells in a lot of situations, plays like Make Disappear and stuff, but also plays all these like 2-drop creatures, and I could see this thing being pretty decent in a deck like that, if not exactly that deck. I'm not sure it makes the cut there, but, in a more focused, deck that actually does play a fair amount of, removal, control-y kind of aspects like that, but also plays a fair amount of 2- and 3-drop creatures that this can benefit. I honestly think that this could be a decent card. So it's my favorite of the day. I'm not saying it's the best of the day, but it's my favorite of the day because I think it's one of the more interesting to kind of workshop around. And it's the cheapest for what that's worth. And in Magic, that tends to be worth a lot. But we made it to the last card of the day. My favorite, I guess, question mark. At least the one that I think is the most powerful in a vacuum. And that is Feldon, Ronom Excavator. This is 2 mana, 1 and a red for a 2/2 legendary human artificer who's got the cane. He's got the cane, everybody. Such nostalgia. But he has haste. Somehow. He also can't block. And whenever he is dealt damage, not whenever he deals damage, I see a lot of people getting messed up with this. Whenever Feldon is dealt damage, exile that many cards from the top of your library. Choose one of them. Until the end of your next turn, you may play that card. That's right. He has cane. And also has haste. Make that work. Flavorfully, I don't know. But still, I also never thought that this dude would be like an aggro 2-drop. That's not really what I think of when I think Feldon in my head. But I guess red-based aggro actually did, believe it or not, need another strong 2-drop. I mean, I've already mentioned Bloodthirsty Adversary, and they have Rada's Firebrand, but straight up mono red aggro probably does need another good 2-drop. And honestly, I think that even in like Red X, like Boros aggro decks and such, where you might have access to better 2-drops. This is just one of the better 2-drops you're going to have access to in Standard, probably the whole time it's going to be in the format. I think this is probably better than Firebrand, although Firebrand has been really good for me on a number of occasions. But this is still, 2 mana, 2/2 haste. Not too shabby, but not the best thing in the world. But still gets to doing damage immediately. And if your opponent does block it to stop the bleeding, you get a free card, which is ridiculous in your aggro deck. So I really like this. It's not Ragavan. I have to bring that card up again. I've seen some people comparing it to Ragavan. And honestly, I can see if you look like super sideways at it, how you might think like this is the safest possible version. No treasure token, no nothing. It costs twice as much and all that. It's just, if you, maybe those people are just scarred by memories of Ragavan. Maybe anything that even remotely reminds them of Ragavan. They're like, nope, not this. But I think this is more than fair in most cases. It dies to most important removal in the format and all that, but it's still going to be a strong enough 2-drop to play in your aggro deck because when it pops off, you might deal like 4-6 damage with this before your opponent decides like, yeah, I gotta stop that right now. And then when they do stop it, unless they do cut it down or something, but if they stop it on blocks, right, you get a free card in your aggro deck, which is just a dream come true. So I didn't really think that we would get Feldon like this, right? Also, multiple people have pointed out that he doesn't synergize with the cane. Like he exiles cards and like you should be able to, like the card you don't pick should go into your graveyard so you can cane it back into your library. Like these, that makes sense. But despite how off flavor this Feldon is, He does look like a very, very playable standard card. We'll see him still. That's about it today, but even though we had a low volume, I still felt like I kind of ran my mouth for a long time. Sorry about that, but it's your turn now. You know, I imagine if you go down in the comments section, this is going to be a pretty polarizing day. Even though there weren't a whole lot of cards to talk about. It's because these commands, specifically, I think are going to garner a lot of different opinions from all kinds of people in the community. So go down there and just, dog me about my takes. Your take on Gix's command is terrible. Your take on Kayla's command is terrible. I'm sure that today is going to end up being relatively controversial, even though there weren't a lot of cards, just because people have like very different opinions on all these commands. So let me know what your favorite ones are down there. You can call my takes bad. It doesn't mean you're a bad person or I'm a bad person. We can all agree to be good people and still dog me about my opinions. So let me know down there in the comment section what your favorite or least favorite commands and all that are, and the other takes. Is Feldon actually kind of not a good standard aggro 2-drop and I'm just misevaluating it? Let me know. Is Monastery Swiftspear a crap card? You're wrong if you think it is. Just let me know what all your takes are. Write me a paragraph about why Blast Zone is bad or something down there in the comment section. And that's about it. I mean, aside from that, I guess you can check me out on twitch.tv/SBMTGdev. Probably going to be talking some Magic. If there's any more spoilers this weekend, I'm likely going to be getting on there Sunday night to talk about those. And then Monday morning or afternoon, evening, we'll pick up with spoilers from the couch. So can't wait to see you for that. But again, don't miss me on Twitch. I'll be over there talking Magic at some point this weekend. Aside from that, if you want to, you can sub to the channel. That'll make you marginally more likely to get my videos in your recommended feed. Just slightly. I'm not sure YouTube puts my videos in recommended ever anymore. But still, if you subscribe, you're theoretically more likely to get the thing. But aside from that, you can like the video because I like when I see a large number next to the thumbs up. That's pretty much the only thing it does. Aside from that, you can support me on Patreon if you're really into it. If you enjoy the content lately and all the wacky, goofy nonsense I've been trying in other videos, and send me $1 a month. That's all I really ask at patreon.com/SBMTG. Link in the description for all the stuff I've mentioned. Also, link in the description for yesterday's spoiler video if you didn't see that. But I am now officially done talking. I know, it seems like I never would be, but I think we're finally at the end, folks. I'm done for this. Just let me know how you felt about all the stuff, and I'll catch you cats later. I'm Deb from The Place. Thanks for watching, Wizards. Spread love and be kind.